They humiliated me in front of the entire company, thinking I'd quietly disappear into obscurity. What they didn't know was that with a single keystroke, I could bring their empire crashing down. The price they'd pay wasn't just millions in losses, it was the permanent destruction of their reputation and power. 8 years of loyalty meant nothing to them. But those 8 years had given me something far more valuable, the keys to their kingdom. And they'd just given me every reason to use them. My name is Rachel Hayes, and for 8 years, I gave everything to Novaris Technologies. 8 years of arriving at 7:30 in the morning, leaving well past 8 at night. 8 years of catching errors that could have cost millions. Of building systems that kept federal contracts flowing like blood through corporate veins. I was 32. Single by choice because this company had been my life, my purpose, my misguided passion. The morning it all changed started like any other. The November air bit through my coat as I badged into the gleaming glass tower in downtown Seattle. The lobby still smelled of expensive coffee and false promises. I remember checking my phone 7:28 a.m., proud of being early as always. The elevator ride to the 14th floor felt different that day, though I couldn't say why. Maybe it was the way conversations died when I entered, or how Jennifer from accounting suddenly found her shoes fascinating when our eyes met. The office hummed with that particular frequency of corporate anxiety, the kind that preceded layoffs or acquisitions. My desk sat in the risk management corner, surrounded by monitors displaying compliance dashboards I'd built from scratch. Each screen showed green light systems running perfectly, contracts secure, audits passed, my work, my invisible fortress protecting billions in federal defense contracts that kept Novaris among the tech elite. Brian Carter had arrived 6 months ago. A golden boy from Silicon Valley with an MBA that cost more than my annual salary. 33 years old with silver temples he probably paid to have died that way. He spoke in buzzwords and breakthrough initiatives, treating those of us who'd built this company like relics from a bygone era. Legacy employees, he'd called us in his first all-hands meeting, his tone making it clear we were baggage, not assets. The email came at 9:15 a.m. Mandatory strategy session. Conference room A, now. No signature, but Brian's assistant always wrote in that breathless, urgent style that made everything sound like a crisis. I saved my work, grabbed my laptop, and walked the carpeted hallway that had witnessed 8 years of my life. The conference room's glass walls were frosted today, unusual for what should have been a routine meeting. Inside, the senior staff sat arranged like a tribunal. Brian at the head, of course, his boyish face wearing that practiced concern that never reached his eyes. "Rachel," he said, not bothering to look up from his tablet. "Glad you could join us." 23 other employees were there. All the senior staff except I did a quick count, except the risk management team. My team. Just me. Alone. Surrounded by faces that wouldn't meet my gaze. "We're discussing the Q4 compensation adjustments," Brian announced, his voice carrying that false warmth of someone about to twist the knife. "As you all know, we're optimizing our human capital investments." Optimizing. Human capital. The words tasted like ash, even hearing them. He pulled up a presentation, names appearing with percentage increases. Jennifer 12%, Marcus 15%, David 10%, name after name. While I sat there, my fingers growing cold despite the climate-controlled 72 degrees. My name never appeared. "Questions?" Brian asked, finally looking directly at me. His smile was a predator's dare. The room held its breath. They all knew. They'd known before I'd walked in. This wasn't a meeting. It was a public execution of my dignity, choreographed with PowerPoint precision. "I don't see risk management on the list," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my chest. Yes." Brian clicked his pen a Mont Blanc, naturally. "After careful evaluation, we've determined that certain positions have reached their maximum compensation threshold. We need to prioritize growth-oriented roles." Growth-oriented. 8 years of 16-hour days. 8 years of being the only person who understood the federal certification system that kept 40% of our revenue flowing. Growth-oriented. "I see," I said, though I didn't, not yet. The full weight of the insult would come later. in the bathroom where I'd lock myself in a stall and bite my knuckle to keep from screaming. We appreciate your understanding. Rachel, your stability is valuable to us. Stability, another word for stagnation. Another way of saying you're furniture now. Part of the office landscape we tolerate but don't acknowledge. The meeting continued for another 40 minutes. Strategic initiatives were discussed. New projects assigned, all flowing around me like I was a stone in a stream. When it ended, people filed out quickly, afraid my humiliation might be contagious. I stayed seated, staring at the blank wall where my name should have appeared. Brian remained too, tapping at his tablet with manicured fingers. Something else, Rachel. 8 years, I said quietly. Pardon. Nothing. I stood, gathered my laptop. Nothing at all. But it wasn't nothing. It was everything. It was the moment Rachel Hayes died, and something else was born, something that understood the language of power and the syntax of revenge. The real humiliation came 3 days later. The quarterly all-hands meeting was Novaris's grand theater, 500 employees packed into the main auditorium, with satellite offices beaming in from Austin, Boston, and D.C. Brian had made these meetings his personal stage since arriving, each one more elaborate than the last. This time, he'd hired a professional lighting crew. The stage glowed like a tech conference keynote, complete with wireless mic and choreographed walk patterns he'd probably practiced in the mirror. I sat in row 15, my usual spot, surrounded by my former team members who'd been redistributed to other departments. Sarah wouldn't look at me. Tom kept checking his phone. The atmosphere felt like a funeral where everyone knew the deceased was still breathing. Innovation through optimization. Brian's voice boomed through the sound system. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. His smile broadcast on 3 massive screens. That's not just a slogan. People, it's our new reality. The presentation unfolded with surgical precision. Revenue projections, market penetration strategies, disruption metrics, all the corporate poetry that sounded meaningful but said nothing. Then came the slide I'd been dreading. Compensation restructuring, rewarding tomorrow's leaders. Now, I know compensation is a sensitive topic, Brian said, his voice dropping to that fake intimate register. But transparency is one of our core values, isn't it? Names appeared on the screen, percentages, applause for each one, the ritual of public validation, designed to create gratitude in the chosen and shame in the overlooked. I watched my colleagues' faces light up as their names appeared, their relief palpable. They'd survived another quarter in the Hunger Games of corporate America. Then Brian did something I hadn't expected. He pulled up an organizational chart. We're also restructuring for efficiency, he announced. Some roles have evolved beyond their original scope. Others, he paused, his laser pointer landing on the risk management section, where my name sat alone in its box, have remained static, comfortable, safe. 500 pairs of eyes found me. I felt them like physical touches, some sympathetic, most merely glad it wasn't them. Rachel, Brian said, and the spotlight, an actual spotlight, swung to find me. Would you stand up? My legs moved without my permission. I stood there, blinking in the harsh light, feeling like a specimen pinned to a board. 8 years of service, he continued, his voice dripping with false admiration. 8 years in the same role. That's dedication, or is it? He let the question hang. In today's market, if you're not growing, you're dying. And some of us, he looked directly at me, seem content with a slow death. Someone laughed, a nervous titter that spread like a virus through the room. Not cruel laughter, but worse, uncomfortable, embarrassed, the kind that came from relief that someone else was the target. But here's the thing, Brian continued, returning to his presentation. We value stability too. Someone needs to keep the lights on while the rest of us reach for the stars. Right, Rachel. Right, I heard myself say, my voice amplified by the directional mic that somehow picked up my response. You can sit down now. I sat. The spotlight moved on. The presentation continued, but the damage was done. I'd been marked, publicly, as the cautionary tale, the employee who'd stayed too long, grown too comfortable, become part of the furniture, the one who kept the lights on while others reached for stars. My phone buzzed with messages. Not support, those would come later, in private, in whispers by the coffee machine. These were from colleagues sharing the live stream link. The meeting was being recorded, archived. My humiliation preserved in 4K resolution for future orientation sessions, probably under a file name like Change Management Case Study. During the break, I escaped to the bathroom. In the mirror, I looked the same brown hair pulled back, minimal makeup, the face of someone who'd prioritized work over everything else. But something had shifted behind my eyes. The docile acceptance was gone, replaced by something harder, sharper. "You okay?" It was Jennifer from accounting, the one who'd gotten 12%. Her concern was real but careful, the way you'd approach a wounded animal that might bite. "Fine," I said, fixing my lipstick with steady hands. "Just fine." "Brian's an ass," she whispered, checking the stalls to make sure we were alone. "Everyone knows you run the entire federal compliance system." "Do they?" I asked, meeting her eyes in the mirror. "Seems like Brian thinks anyone could do it." Jennifer looked away. "I'm sorry about laughing. It was nervous. I didn't mean—" "It's fine," I repeated, and I meant it. Her laughter, their laughter. Brian's theatrical cruelty, none of it mattered anymore. What mattered was what came next. I returned to the auditorium for the second half. Brian was explaining the new performance metrics, how they'd separate the wheat from the chaff, the future from the past. I sat in my assigned seat, in my assigned role, the designated failure in his success story. But Brian had made a critical error, one that only someone drunk on their own power could make. He'd assumed humiliation would break me, make me quit, save him the trouble and potential lawsuit of firing an 8-year veteran. He'd assumed I was weak because I was quiet, defeated because I was professional. He'd assumed wrong. As he spoke about optimization and human capital and reaching for stars, I thought about the federal certification system humming along in the background, invisible and essential, the system only I fully understood, the system I'd built without documentation, without redundancy, because they'd been too cheap to hire backup. Brian wanted to make me the symbol of everything wrong with the old Novaris fine, but symbols have power, especially when they're holding the keys to the kingdom. The meeting ended with his signature catchphrase, "Disrupt or be disrupted." The irony was delicious. He had no idea how much disruption was coming. The revelation came at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, 3 weeks after my public humiliation. I couldn't sleep, hadn't been sleeping well since the all-hands meeting, so I'd logged into the system to review upcoming certification renewals. It was muscle memory at this point, checking the federal compliance dashboard the way other insomniacs might scroll through social media. That's when I saw it, buried in an IT department memo from 6 months ago, Risk Management Redundancy Elimination Cost Savings Initiative. My hands went cold as I read. They'd fired Marcus Brennan, my backup, the only other person with federal certification authority. They'd eliminated Jennifer Wu's position in auxiliary compliance. They'd outsourced the documentation team to contractors who lasted exactly 3 weeks before realizing the complexity and quitting. In their hunger to cut costs and boost quarterly profits, they'd created a single point of failure. Me. I pulled up the federal contract system, my credentials sliding through layers of security like a key in a well-oiled lock. There it was, beautiful in its complexity, 43 active defense contracts, 16 healthcare infrastructure projects, 9 classified telecommunications programs, combined value, $87 million, weekly revenue flow, $250,000, all requiring active certification status to remain valid. And at the bottom of every single authentication chain, Rachel Hayes, Certified Federal Risk Compliance Manager, Authorization Level 5. I was the only one, the only person in the entire company who could validate, modify, or revoke these certifications. They'd need minimum 6 months to train a replacement, assuming they could find someone willing to navigate the Byzantine federal qualification process. The background checks alone took 3 months. My laugh echoed in my empty apartment, sharp and bitter. They'd made me invisible, insignificant, a piece of furniture while simultaneously handing me the power to destroy everything. I opened a new browser, incognito mode, and searched Federal Compliance Certification Revocation Procedures. The answer was simpler than I'd imagined. As the primary certification holder, I had the authority to withdraw my personal validation at any time. It was designed as a protection for contractors, ensuring they couldn't be forced to certify non-compliant work. One click, one confirmation, and every project under my authorization would freeze pending recertification. The next morning, I arrived at 7:25 a.m., earlier than usual. The office was empty except for security and the overnight IT skeleton crew. I made coffee, sat at my desk, and began my research properly. Email chains revealed the full scope of their stupidity. Brian had personally pushed the redundancy elimination initiative. He'd overridden concerns from the legal department, dismissed warnings from senior engineers. "We're paying for duplicate roles," he'd written. "Rachel has never missed a day in 8 years. Why do we need backup?" The irony was excruciating. My reliability, my dedication, the very things he'd mocked as static and comfortable, had been their justification for leaving me as the sole keeper of their federal lifeline. I found more treasures in the archived emails, warnings I'd sent about system vulnerabilities, all marked acknowledged, but never acted upon. Requests for additional training that were denied for budget reasons. A particularly damning thread where Brian explicitly stated that risk management was a checkbox function that any competent administrator could handle. Any competent administrator, I saved that one to my personal drive. By lunch, I'd mapped out the entire ecosystem. The Defense Department contracts were the most critical. They had penalty clauses for delays that started at $100,000 per day. The healthcare infrastructure projects were tied to federal stimulus funds that would be revoked if certification lapsed. The telecommunications programs were so classified that even a temporary suspension would trigger a full security review, potentially barring Novaris from future classified work. "Working hard, I see." Brian's voice made me look up. He stood at my cubicle entrance, coffee in hand, that practiced smile playing on his lips. "Always," I replied, minimizing my screens with practiced calm. Good. Keep those lights on, right?" He chuckled at his own callback, then grew serious. "Actually, Rachel, I wanted to discuss your future here." My future, as if he had any say in it anymore. "I'm implementing a new performance framework, metrics-based, very objective. I'll need you to document all your processes, create training materials. We're bringing in some consultants to assess operational efficiency. Translation document everything so we can replace you with someone cheaper." "Of course," I said, my voice pleasant, professional. "When do you need this by?" "End of quarter. Take your time. Be thorough. We want to make sure nothing falls through the cracks when we optimize." "When we fire you," he meant, when we take your 8 years of institutional knowledge and hand it to someone making half your salary. "I'll make sure everything is documented," I promised, and I meant it. Every email he'd ignored, every warning dismissed, every corner cut, all documented. He walked away, satisfied with my compliance. If only he knew that he'd just set his own countdown timer. End of quarter was 6 weeks away, more than enough time to prepare everything I needed. That night, I purchased a new laptop with cash, paid for a VPN service with a prepaid card, created encrypted cloud storage under a pseudonym. I wasn't just going to withdraw my certification, I was going to ensure they knew exactly why their empire crumbled. The federal certification system had a beautiful feature I discovered in subsection 47 of the Compliance Manual. Withdrawal of certification required a reason statement, which would become part of the public record. Whatever I wrote would be visible to every federal contractor, every government oversight committee, every competitor looking for blood in the water. Brian wanted metrics-based, objective assessment. I'd give him 8 years' worth. The power supply hummed beneath my desk, a soft vibration I'd never noticed before, or maybe I had noticed, had just accepted it as background noise, like my own heartbeat, but now I heard it clearly, the pulse of the machine I controlled, waiting for my command. They thought I was furniture. They were about to learn that even furniture could burn the whole house down. The preparation took 5 weeks of meticulous planning. Each day, a careful performance of the compliant employee they expected me to be. Every morning, I arrived at 7:25 a.m., brewed my coffee, and sat at my desk like always. To anyone watching, I was the model of defeated acceptance. I attended meetings where my input was ignored, submitted reports that went unread, and maintained the federal certifications that kept their money flowing. The perfect invisible employee. But my evenings belonged to the plan. On my personal laptop, encrypted and hidden, I built my archive. Screenshots of every dismissed warning, every ignored risk assessment, every email where Brian or his leadership team had overruled safety protocols for profit. I cataloged them with the precision of a prosecutor building a case, cross-referenced with federal compliance violations and their corresponding penalties. The evidence was damning. In May, Brian had ignored my warning about a security vulnerability in a defense contract, calling it excessive caution. That vulnerability, if exposed during an audit, carried a $3 million fine. In July, he'd fast-tracked a healthcare project without proper testing phases, dismissing my concerns as process obsession. The liability exposure was $12 million. I documented 17 separate instances where critical warnings were buried, each one a potential federal violation. Together, they painted a picture of gross negligence that would make any government auditor salivate. The training materials Brian had requested became my masterpiece of malicious compliance. I created hundreds of pages of documentation. Every process explained in excruciating detail, but buried within the technical language were breadcrumbs, references to ignored protocols, links to unaddressed vulnerabilities, footnotes highlighting every corner they'd cut. It would take them months to realize what I'd done, and by then, the damage would be irreversible. 3 weeks into my preparation, they made another cut. Tom from IT, who'd been with the company 6 years, was let go to streamline operations. His goodbye email was 3 sentences of forced positivity. That night, I added his name to my list, another casualty of Brian's efficiency obsession. Sarah from my old team was next, replaced by a contractor making 40% less. She cleaned out her desk while Brian held a leadership meeting 3 doors down, discussing the quarterly profit projections her sacrifice had helped achieve. Each termination strengthened my resolve. I wasn't just doing this for me anymore. I established routines that would provide my alibi. Every Thursday, I left at exactly 5:30 p.m. for a yoga class, documented by the studio's check-in system. Saturdays were grocery shopping at the farmer's market, always paying with a credit card for the timestamp. Sundays, volunteer work at the library, logged in their visitor system. When the time came, I needed to be somewhere public, witnessed, undeniably disconnected from any computer system. The technical preparation was delicate. I studied the Federal Certification System's user agreement with the attention of a scholar studying ancient texts. Section 12.3 was clear: certification holders maintained personal liability for their authorizations. Section 18.7 stated that withdrawal of certification required no corporate approval. It was a personal ethical decision protected by whistleblower statutes. I practiced the process on the testing server, timing each step. Log into the federal portal 45 seconds. Navigate to certification management 30 seconds. Select bulk certification review 20 seconds. Execute withdrawal with reason statement 2 minutes to type. 5 seconds to confirm. Total time from login to logout under 4 minutes. 4 minutes to destroy 8 years of their profit streams. My reason statement went through 17 drafts. It needed to be factual, specific, and devastating. No emotion, no vindictiveness, just cold, hard documentation of why I could no longer ethically certify Novaris's federal contracts. I cited specific ignored warnings, referenced email chains by date and timestamp, quoted Brian's dismissive responses verbatim. The final version was 8 paragraphs of bureaucratic poetry that would echo through government procurement offices for years. 2 weeks before my planned execution date, paranoia crept in. Were they watching my computer activity? Had they noticed my after-hours research? I started varying my routines, sometimes working late, sometimes leaving early. I submitted exceptional work, even volunteered for additional projects. Brian actually complimented my renewed enthusiasm in a staff meeting, oblivious to the irony. I purchased a second burner laptop, paid cash at an electronics store 40 miles away, created another layer of backup for my evidence, uploaded to servers in 3 different countries. If they tried to bury this, tried to spin it as a disgruntled employee's vendetta, the truth would surface anyway. The weekend before my final week, I sat in my apartment surrounded by 8 years of memories, performance reviews that had once glowed with praise, photos from company parties where I genuinely believed I was part of something important, the certificate from when I'd saved them from a federal audit by catching a critical error. All worthless now, currency in an economy that no longer existed. I burned them all in my fireplace, watching 8 years turn to ash and smoke. It felt like a ceremony, a burial for the person who'd walked into Novaris believing hard work and loyalty meant something. Monday morning arrived gray and drizzling, Seattle showing its typical February mood. I dressed carefully my best suit, the one I'd bought for important presentations that no one remembered. If this was my last week as their invisible guardian, I'd be impeccably professional to the end. The email came at 11:15 a.m. from Brian's assistant. Performance review meeting Friday 2:00 p.m., conference room A. Perfect. They'd scheduled my termination for Friday afternoon, the corporate equivalent of taking a dying pet to the farm upstate. It gave me a deadline, a countdown to coordinate with precision. I responded within minutes, confirmed, I'll have all requested materials ready. And I would, every piece of evidence, every documented warning, every proof of their negligence all ready to submit to federal investigators the moment they showed me the door. But first, I had a certification system to visit, a withdrawal to process, an empire to topple. Thursday night, I backed up everything one final time, checked every encryption, every upload, every piece of evidence. My yoga class was at 5:30 p.m., 90 minutes of witnessed alibi while my professional time bomb waited for the perfect moment. Tomorrow, they would fire Rachel Hayes, the invisible employee who kept the lights on. They had no idea they were about to cut their own throat. Friday arrived wrapped in Pacific Northwest mist, the kind that made the whole city feel like it was holding its breath. I woke at 5 a.m., unable to sleep longer, made coffee with deliberate calm, each movement practiced and precise, checked my personal laptop one last time. Everything was ready, the evidence archived, the reason statement polished, the backup plan secured, 8 years of preparation for 4 minutes of execution. At the office by 7:25 a.m., I performed my morning ritual for the last time. Coffee from the break room, the smell of cheap grounds that had become oddly comforting over the years. My desk, organized with obsessive precision, the monitors displaying green lights on every federal dashboard, all systems operational, all contracts secure. For now, the morning passed in surreal normalcy. I processed 3 certification renewals, answered 14 emails, attended a compliance meeting where my suggestions were noted and ignored. At lunch, I sat alone in the cafeteria, watching my colleagues discuss weekend plans, oblivious to the earthquake about to hit their comfortable world. At 1:45 p.m., I locked my computer and walked to the bathroom. In the mirror, my face was calm, almost serene. I touched up my lipstick, straightened my jacket, and pulled out my personal phone. In the parking garage, hidden between concrete pillars and fluorescent lights, I opened my burner laptop. The federal portal login screen appeared, familiar as my own reflection. My fingers moved without hesitation. Username, password, 2-factor authentication from a burner phone I'd bought just for this moment. The certification management system welcomed me with its usual bureaucratic interface. 43 contracts appeared in neat rows, each one representing millions in revenue, hundreds of jobs, Brian's entire success story. I navigated to the bulk management section, selected all. The system asked if I was sure. Such a polite system, always asking for confirmation before allowing destruction. I clicked yes. The withdrawal screen appeared. Reason for certification withdrawal. This will become part of public record. I pasted my prepared statement, 8 paragraphs of documented negligence, each word chosen for maximum impact. After 8 years as the sole federal risk compliance manager for Novartis Technologies, I am withdrawing my certification due to systemic disregard for federal compliance protocols, documented safety violations, and executive leadership's repeated dismissal of critical risk assessments. Specific instances include: the list that followed was comprehensive, damning, and completely factual. Every date, every email, every ignored warning, Brian's name appeared 17 times, always with direct quotes from his dismissive responses. My finger hovered over the confirm button. 8 years versus 1 click, a career versus a moment, everything I'd built versus everything they'd taken. I pressed confirm. Certification withdrawal processed. All associated contracts have been suspended pending recertification. Notification has been sent to relevant federal oversight departments. The screen's simple confirmation belied the chaos it had just unleashed. Somewhere in the building above me, alerts were beginning to fire. Phones were starting to ring. The first dominoes in a catastrophic chain were falling. I closed the laptop, walked back to the elevator, and returned to my desk at 1:58 p.m., unlocked my computer, pulled up a spreadsheet, and waited. 2 p.m. arrived with Brian's assistant appearing at my desk. "They're ready for you." The walk to conference room A felt like a victory march disguised as a funeral procession. Through the glass walls, I could see them assembled: Brian at the head, HR Director Patricia Morse, and someone from legal I didn't recognize. They hadn't noticed yet. The system alerts would be hitting the project managers first, then working their way up the chain. "Rachel," Brian said as I entered, his smile particularly sharp today. "Please, sit." I sat, placing my company laptop on the table with deliberate care. "I'll cut to the chase," he began, sliding a folder across the table. "Your position has been identified for restructuring. We're offering a modest severance, 2 weeks in exchange for a clean transition of your responsibilities." 2 weeks, 8 years, and they offered 2 weeks. "I see," I said, opening the folder, pretending to read while watching Brian's phone on the table. It hadn't started ringing yet. "We'll need all your documentation, passwords, and certification credentials transferred to IT by end of day," Patricia added, her voice professionally sympathetic. "We've already identified external consultants to take over the federal compliance role." That's when Brian's phone exploded. Not rang, exploded with calls, texts, notifications. He frowned, picked it up, and his face went white. "What do you mean the contracts are frozen?" he said into the phone. Then, louder, "All of them. That's impossible." Patricia's phone started next, then the legal representatives. Within 30 seconds, the room had transformed into a crisis center. I sat perfectly still, the eye of the hurricane I'd created. Brian's eyes found mine, understanding dawning with horrible clarity. "What did you do?" "I withdrew my certification," I said simply, "as is my right under federal statute 18.7. "You can't. This is sabotage. This is my ethical obligation when I can no longer certify that proper protocols are being followed." I pulled out my personal phone, showed him the screen. "I've documented every violation, every ignored warning, every dismissed risk assessment, 8 years of evidence, Brian, all submitted to federal oversight along with my withdrawal statement." Patricia was on her phone, voice rising. $250,000 per week. How is one person authorized for—" She stopped, stared at me. "You're the only one. There's no backup." "There was," I said. "Brian eliminated the positions. Cost savings, remember." The legal representative was typing frantically on his laptop. "The withdrawal statement is already public record. Federal databases, procurement websites, Christ, our competitors can see this." Brian stood, his face cycling through rage, disbelief, and finally, desperate calculation. "Reverse it. Whatever you want, salary increase, promotion, equity, name it." "I'm afraid that's impossible," I said, standing and collecting my personal items from my purse. "Reversing a withdrawal requires a new certification process, background checks, federal approval, documentation review, minimum 6 months, assuming you can find someone qualified willing to attach their name to this company." "You vindictive bitch," Brian snarled, his polished veneer finally cracking. You've destroyed everything. No, I said, walking to the door. I withdrew my certification. You destroyed everything when you decided I was worthless, when you eliminated every backup to save money, when you ignored every warning to boost profits. I paused at the door, looking back at the chaos. Oh, and Brian. That public withdrawal statement I made sure to quote you extensively, especially the part about risk management being a checkbox function any competent administrator could handle. The last thing I saw before leaving was Brian falling into his chair, phone pressed to his ear, trying to explain to someone the board, federal investigators, panicked clients, how he'd let a piece of furniture burn down his empire. I walked out of Novaris Technologies at 2:18 p.m., my personal belongings in a small box, a coffee mug, a photo frame, a stress ball I'd never actually used. Security didn't stop me. They hadn't been notified yet. The chaos in conference room A was probably still consuming all executive attention. My phone started vibrating before I reached my car. Unknown numbers, texts from former colleagues, voicemails piling up. I turned it off, tossed it in the glove compartment, and drove home in blessed silence. At my apartment, I poured a glass of wine, the good bottle I'd been saving for a special occasion, and opened my personal laptop. The public federal contractor database already showed the beautiful red letters next to every Novaris contract. Certification suspended, pending review. The first news alert appeared at 4:37 p.m. Tech giant Novaris faces federal contract crisis. By 6 p.m., it was trending on financial Twitter. The stock market had closed, but after-hours trading showed Novaris down 12% and falling. I ordered Thai food, extra spicy, and settled in to watch the apocalypse unfold. My personal email filled with messages from recruiters who'd somehow already gotten word. Former colleagues sent variations of "Holy shit, was this you?" and "Brian is losing his mind." Sarah, who'd been let go 2 weeks ago, sent simply, "Queen." The local news picked it up at 11 p.m. Seattle-based Novaris Technologies faces potential loss of federal contracts worth over $80 million after their sole compliance officer withdrew certification, citing executive negligence and safety violations. They showed Brian's LinkedIn photo, then mine pulled from some company event years ago. I looked younger, hopeful, still believing in corporate loyalty. That woman was gone now. Saturday morning brought the full media storm. The Wall Street Journal ran a piece titled, "The Single Point of Failure That Cost Millions." They'd done their homework, connecting the dots between Brian's cost-cutting measures and the certification crisis. My withdrawal statement was quoted extensively, each documented violation dissected by financial analysts who calculated the expanding damage. The federal investigation announcement came at noon, 3 departments launching simultaneous audits, triggered by the specific violations I documented. Each audit would freeze the contracts further, adding months to any possible recovery. Competitors smelled blood. Link Systems announced they were ready to assist with any federal contracts requiring immediate support. Meridian Tech publicly offered to hire any Novaris employees concerned about stability. The sharks were circling, and the water was churning red. My phone, when I finally turned it on, had 97 missed calls. I deleted the voicemails without listening, but one text made me pause. From Jennifer in accounting. "Emergency board meeting tomorrow. Brian's fighting for his life. Thought you should know." Sunday's emergency board meeting made it to the business news by evening. Sources inside Novaris confirm heated discussions about leadership changes as federal contract crisis deepens. The story included a detail that made me smile. Brian had apparently tried to blame the entire situation on my mental instability and vindictive nature, only to have board members read my withdrawal statement aloud, asking him to explain each documented violation. Monday brought lawsuits. Shareholders filed first.